Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Friday review. And today I am here to review Kingdom Immortal, the second full-length album from Trenton, New Jersey-based metal band Midnite Hellion. This, of course, was released through Power Chord Productions on January 21st of this year. And of course, if you can tell, this is one of the bands I ended up seeing pretty much at the Fulton 55 opening up for, well, Anvil, since they've been touring with Anvil for this record alongside White Wizard. And that's who I all caught at the Fulton 55 on July the 8th of this year. So I'm finally here to, of course, to review this album. So without further ado, let me get into my overall thoughts on Kingdom Immortal by Midnite Hellion. So let's get into it, folks. Okay, before I really get into, my overall thoughts on Kingdom Immortal by Midnite Hellion, you know what I have to do. I have to do a track listing rundown so I can tell you folks what are the songs are on this album, how many songs are on this album, and what's the time length for this album. And since there's at least 8 songs on the album, it all clocks in at least at the length of 34 minutes and 41 seconds. Metal Archives states that it clocks in at 35 minutes and 2 seconds, but since I had ripped this into my computer and looking at least the time length, it's at least, and of course even when putting it to my CD player, it's the length of 34 minutes and 41 seconds. So there we go, just a little, pretty much over 34 minutes. So there we go. Okay, and of course these 8 songs are, of course, HMO, which apparently is also known whenever they would introduce this song, means heavy metal rock and roll. And that's pretty much in the chorus. Then, of course, we get into She Demon, then into Phantom Land, Rapscallion, Speed Demon, Resurrected, Army of the Dead, and then finally ending with In Sickness and in Hell. So there's your 8 songs. Yes, all wholesome lyric and song titles and everything. Okay. So, Midnite Hellion, again, these guys, of course, like I stated, were based out of Trenton, New Jersey, and they were formed all the way back in 2011. However, it was a much more different lineup. The only member that's at least, as far as founding members, that's left in the band, and who's been in the band since its formation, has been drummer Drew Rizzo. But beginning with their 2011 demo, The Fever, it pretty much was at least almost up to 6 members in a way, because besides, Drew Rizzo, the drummer and founding member of the band, most of the members was pretty much 5 members each. 3 guitar players, 1 bass player, and 1 vocalist. And it's crazy. Who knows whether or not there were session musicians in there or not, but it was a much more different lineup, even at one point even having a female vocalist. But ever since the releases of Enter the Unknown and so on, and beginning with, of course, the Condemned to Hell full-length album from 2017, it pretty much got shortened down to at least a 3-piece, so to a trio. And Condemned to Hell had at least a slightly different lineup, even though we have at least at least 2 members that was on the Condemned to Hell record, that being the most recent member to the band, Rich Kubik, who is both the bass player and vocalist here, and of course Drew Rizzo. But for the Condemned to Hell album, and in the only full-length album with him on guitar, is Jeremy Moles. I know there were some guest musicians on this record, being Mario Di Bartolo, I think I pronounce, and of course Teresa Lee Mantia, who is at least provides pretty much additional vocals to at least to one of the songs on the album, that being track 9 according to Metal Archives, and of course the release. Of course, she has some hand in at least lyrical writing and stuff and compositions here and there for the Midnite Hellion album here, Kingdom Immortal. But since then, Jeremy Moles was then replaced by Charles Kogler, and so that's pretty much what we have here for the lineup for Kingdom Immortal, and it's been the lineup that has been touring with Anvil and so on, and the lineup that I got to see at the Fulton 55. and that's, of course, is the lineup of Drew Rizzo on drums, Charles Kogler on guitar, and, of course, Rich Kubik on bass/vocals. So this has been your lineup, and since 2021, they at least had released a single for the album, that being Speed Demon, which is not a cover of at least the plethora of songs that have been called Speed Demon. And of course, Phantom Land is the most recent and last single to be released prior to Kingdom Immortal. That's in 2022 here. And then so finally here we are with Kingdom Immortal, the second full-length album. Now, whether or not, because of the different lineup changes over time, who knows whether or not that meant the sound, but so far, since Condemned to Hell, these guys have been a lot more kind of bordering here and there, a little bit on some more thrash at times, but it's definitely been more speed metal/heavy metal, and it all continues in here, but I think it's a lot more edged out and more refined on this record, and that's really can be heard in songs such as HMO, She Demon, and Phantom Land, and Rapscallion, Resurrected, Army of the Dead, and of course in Sickness and in Hell. These songs really, you can tell that they've really kind of been sharpening up their axes a lot more. The writing is a lot more, it's a little more better structured, and I think even it just sounds a lot more fleshed out. Like you can tell that they're starting to really tightening up a lot of their songwriting here and there. I mean, the lyrics are definitely seem to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek and really kind of play around with slightly more, I guess, a bit more crazier aspects. But I think musically, it's a lot more refined, and I think they're really kind of edging out the musically a lot better here. And I think the best examples of some of these songs, and I think one of the things I think that, for me personally, puts this album much more over Condemned to Hell is due to, from the production, which of course is a lot more crunchier. There's a lot, especially Charles Kogler's guitar has a nice crunch to it, has a nice warmth. Most of the mixing and the drums and the vocals and everything, it just sounds a lot more, a bit more one-upped, I would say. You know, I'm trying to find some of the best words, but you know, it sounds a lot more refined. That too I think that is very much due to producer Alex Perialis, who, if you're familiar with Alex Perialis, he has been a longtime engineer and producer since 1974, according to Metal Archives. However, if you're just like me, who is pretty much has went down the rabbit hole of 80s underground obscure metal from labels such as Metal Blade, Megaforce, Combat, and so on, and even New Renaissance, he's at least had been on the forefront of some of these records for a very long time. And the plethora of bands he's worked with, whether it be Accuser from Germany, Anthrax, at least for these Fistful of Metal and Spreading to the Disease albums, and of course even State of Euphoria, At War, and some of their albums, mostly Retaliatory Strike and their last album, Infidel, Attacker on the Second Coming record. Another one would be Blessed Death with the Destined for Extinction album, and of course Horror of Pain album, mostly as the guy, I guess, for the recording. Carnivore on, of course, the Retaliation record. Of course, David Rock Feinstein of the Rods for his 3 of his records. And of course, even working with the Rods as well on the Heavier Than Now album. EXE, Gothic Slam, Exciter on the Violence and Force record. Holocross, MOD, and of course SOD, especially on the classic Stormtroopers of Death record, you know, Speak English or Die. And of course, Metallica during some of their earlier stuff, Nuclear Assault, Overkill, beginning with Fuel the Fire, Taking Over, Under the Influence, and such records. Raven, of course, being the engineer for both the live record, Live at the Inferno, and Stay Hard, as an assistant engineer. Testament on some of those classic records like The Legacy, The New Order, and Practice What You Preach. Thrasher, TT Quick, Violence. Easy. I'm just reading through the entire thing just to give you even though you got the, you already got it already on what the history this guy has, but I think I think he's one of the main reasons for why I believe Kingdom Immortal just sounds a lot better is just because of who they've got behind. Of course, even to kind of bring up some other sort of ties to some great metal from the 1980s. The artists, there's at least two guys that are credited for the artwork of the album, even though some might look at this as a little amateurish, but these are at least somewhat known names to at least anyone who's at least looked into and really kind of dived a lot more deeper into the underground 80s metal of the past. You know, Rich Larson, who of course did some work for Intruder, and of course Steve Fassner, who also worked with Intruder but also worked with Overkill to do the artwork for like Under the Influence and The Years of Decay. So Midnite Hellion was able to kind of get a pretty cool team of guys who know and who have at least a good past record of working with underground heavy metal bands since the 1980s, and was able to kind of get these people together to make sure that they at least had a pretty good product to release and give these songs that oomph, and I think they were able to. I mean, this is just a really good, crunchy, heavy metal record from beginning to end that's definitely going to make you reminded of bands like, for example, Overkill, reminded of probably like Hellstar, and reminded of at least maybe early Metallica and Testament and some of these bands. You know, it definitely has that New York, New Jersey metal sound, even not too far off from like Anthrax and At War and some of that. It really does have that overall vibe to it, that atmosphere, and I think it's able to give the album its overall distinctiveness, and I think it's a really solid record they're able to put together. Again, my personal favorites for the album have to be like Phantom Land, which really kind of takes its musical sort of riff and everything a bit from the song Mr. Scary by Dokken, because it really kind of has that George Lynch style guitar riffing, but it works, and it's a great track nonetheless. I also dig Rapscallion, which is a real kind of catchy sort of heavy metal romp. Resurrected has a nice sort of groove going on to there. Army of the Dead is it's probably the longest song though on the album, because it clocks in at the length of 7 minutes and 50 minutes. Let me bring this one up again, because of Metal Archives probably kind of got a little bit of the time like a little bit wrong. This real quick, 7 minutes and 47 seconds. But it is the longest song on the record, but it's a really cool track, and it kind of changes pace here and there to keep things more interesting for the track, but it's a really good track, and it was great hearing this song live. It's a really good track. And of course it ends out with a heavy banger like In Sickness and in Hell, and that's pretty much my final favorite track off the album. But there's some really good tracks here nonetheless. You know, HMO, She Demon, Speed Demon are definitely three really good songs, but I think the ones I picked out, like again, Phantom Land, Rapscallion, Resurrected, Army of the Dead, and In Sickness and in Hell, are pretty much my absolute favorite songs of the album. So there's just a lot of good tracks on here. Great mixing, great production, and just a great sound, great package overall. And Charles Kogler, I think, is a really good fit for the band. I think he's able to. I think he really provided the band with some really good overall riffs and stuff. It's a solid record from beginning to end, so I'm just going to leave it there. So there you go, folks. Those are my overall thoughts on Kingdom Immortal by Midnite Hellion, and my rating is a 9.55 out of 10. It's a really solid album from start to finish, and I think any of you who's into classic, 80s speed metal and everything, who really digs that sort of period from like Megaforce, Combat, Metal Blade, and such, I think you'll definitely dig this one. And if you are impressed by the Alex Perialis and of course the lists of albums that he's produced over the years, definitely should give you at least some sort of maybe some inspiration to go and check this one out. I'm going to leave you a link to their Bandcamp page where you can at least buy this record and of course listen to the album and so on, and of course hopefully support Midnite Hellion. They are a really great band live, and they've definitely put out a really good studio album. I think this so far is their best full-length album right now. And I hopefully that they're able to keep the tank running and into the next period of years and records and whatnot. Hopefully that they're able to keep it going. So there we go. I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.